First of all, welcome. My name is John Platais. I don't even really know what to call myself. I manage a development team that's responsible for implementing new solutions combining automation and AIML. So that's what we do. I work for one of the largest fintech companies on the globe, and we build stuff that's needed based on whatever the request is and the data available. So one of the things I wanted to introduce to you today, and I think it's a thing that has a tremendous amount of importance in the security space. I'm not a security person, you guys are. So, I'm counting on you throughout this discussion to jump in and tell me if that's accurate or not, is really the growing persistence of virtual assistants in just about everything that we use. Now, the notion of a chatbot, that's not new. Okay, it's not. We've used them. In fact, if I go back in time to the early 90s, walking into TV Lenny's American, in the back corner, there's the computer section, right? And they were still selling 486s at the time. And when you opened it up, a little virtual rendering of Jean-Luc Picard would talk to you. I mean, it was basically like the totally mind-blowing version of Clippy. And so, these are not new concepts. However, within the last several years, we've combined that concept really with, the notion of AIML and being able to save and use, come on, Betsy. Save and use that data for persistent purposes. So I'm going to be quite honest, I find chatbots and virtual assistants monumentally annoying. Whenever I go to a site or connect to a business through an IVR, and the first thing you do is either walk you through this comprehensive press 1 for this, but of course they always have to preface it with, on our website, you can find the answers to all your problems. Well, I went there. Why do you think I'm calling you? So, you get the idea that, we've slowly but surely added these things into our estates and our environments to the point where now they are, in fact, a security question. Because the world is using them, and I'm going to stand over here because my old eyes can't read it, and these are too far away. But I'm just going to point out a few things that, we need to pay attention to. If anything, the number of businesses, the number of applications that we rely on that use virtual assistants has increased exponentially in the last 5 years. To the point where just about, I'm trying to think of one that doesn't. If you go to any Fortune 500 companies, virtual interface, website's kind of not an appropriate way to describe what these things do. You're going to interact with some form of virtual assistant. It's going to pop up in the bottom right corner. Hello, I'm whatever. Can I help you? And you close it because you don't want to talk to that thing. And then it pops up again. Close it. It's. And I know I'm hitting a nerve because there's like half the room. So, point being, it is growing in terms of utilization in our environment. To the fact that now our average consumers prefer it. 74% of users and consumers for these companies would rather talk to the bot before they have to talk to a person. I don't know, maybe I'm old. I think I'm old because I don't. I've learned, actually Mike Goetzman, who runs this show, taught me a very long time ago that when you call and it says, press 1 for this, press 2, just keep hitting 0. Eventually the thing gives up and sends you to a person. Okay, but my oldness aside, the reality is that a large portion of people prefer that. They prefer it for the quick answers that they don't have to look up. They prefer oftentimes for the ability to get their problem resolved without having to re-explain it 10 times as the company transitions you from department to department. So there are legitimate reasons why you may want to look at a bot in your solution or your business. If I go down and I look at some of the other statistics, Significant return on investment. If time allows at the end of this, I will show you. Well, first of all, how many people come to conferences because you like the swag? I do. It's cool, right? In my opinion, when you walk out of any one of these talks, you should have some mental swag to go with, including the ability to implement what I talked about tomorrow in your business. So if time allows at the end, I'll show you how to very quickly implement an AIML driven chatbot in your organization in probably about 15 minutes. Now that doesn't mean that it won't take time to customize it to whatever it is you do, but as far as getting it built and built for free, that's the easy part. Okay. So, what's that? So more and more people continue to use these products as we expand into our different environments. Social media, I don't even really have to talk about. I mean, if you look at our top social media platforms, they all have some form of messaging system, including the ability to interact with the platform through it. So from consumer, a usage, and a social media perspective, okay, they're a very clear reality. Taking it a bit further, if you look at the service space, again, it comes down to, the ability to reduce costs in your environment, in essence, by reducing the number of people that need to be able to respond to questions. I mean, how many of you today have within your organization a segment that uses a bot to answer simple questions for users? Anybody? You do? Okay. Hopefully, if I ask you the same question next year, you'll all be able to say, oh, we do now. Okay. If you look a step further, and man, my eyes have just gone to garbage like inside of like 6 months.
Maybe they promised you a bigger screen.
What's that?
Maybe they promised you a bigger screen.
Oh, no, that's all right. It's my own fault for putting so much text on a slide, which usually I don't do. Probably one of the most powerful pieces is in the voice section, one step down, that says 43% of users between the ages of 16 and 64 are using voice command peripherals in their environment. I get the age 14 side of it. I'm a little shocked at the 64 side of it. So I'll give you one example. One of the pieces in my company is a voice-driven interactive UI for current company statistics, where you can sit down, talk to it, and say, how is this particular application doing today? And it will give you the answer. And I remember when it was first demoed to me, I looked at it and I thought, who's going to do that? Who's going to sit down in front of their computer and talk to it to get the answer when I could type it while I'm typing 12 other things probably faster? And I won't have to rephrase it so that it understands it. Apparently, again, I'm old, because there is a large and growing population that will use it to the point that eventually it will be one of the preferred mechanisms for interacting with others, interacting with service providers, and providing service to customers. If you take another step further, ooh, that's my favorite. 73% of healthcare providers say that they can better serve and diagnose ailments using AIML, including using it through interactive bots that doctors, nurses, and other practitioners can use. That too, kind of amazing that AIML is going to drive the way they prescribe medication and determine when, where, and how you'll use it. So ultimately, when you look at all of these statistics, the general overall answer is that utilization of intelligent bots is increasing. It's increasing in both frequency, velocity, as well as its user base, whereas the age of the user used to be a determining factor in the types of technologies they use. This is one that seems to transcend that, because we all talk and we all interact with others. Now here's the key gap. And the key gap is where all of these different functions struggle, and it's where the function that I'm going to show you later doesn't. And it's the simple fact that most of these still still today are very rule-driven models. You ask this, therefore I give you this answer. You ask this, I don't know what you asked, therefore I ask you to repeat it. And if I have to ask you to repeat it more than 3 times, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand, let me get you to a person. Okay, these are pretty simple if-then algorithms that, most of us can develop, probably pretty quickly. So as most of our companies grow in global popularity, we have to deal with the fact that not everyone asks the same question in the same way, even though the intent is the same. And I'll give you an example. In one of my implementations of a bot, I had a relatively simple set of algorithms that allowed a person to check the performance metrics of their environment from system to system component to interactivity with other systems, etc., through the bot. In other words, how's the performance of my system? And when I showcased this to the team, I typed in, okay, how's the performance of system ABC123XYZ, some random system. And it went back in and it attached to multiple different systems. It aggregated the data in the back end, and it came back with a response and a grade, and ultimately how it did derive that grade. Okay? The cool part was all the algorithms at the back end, not so much the interface, in my opinion. But the reality is that I programmed it to understand what the word performance means. When somebody asks for performance, do this. My team was like, well, yeah, that's kind of nice. Okay, cool. Then I went back and I typed in, OMG, my app is crazy slow with about 12 A's in it. WTF. And they all laughed because they figured I was screwing around. It came back with a 98% certainty that this was a performance-based question, and therefore took it down the performance path. So being able to isolate the intent based on sample data of the inputs is a critical piece that takes you from, can I help you find where the status of your shipment is, to actually being able to understand your intent, understand your problem, and ultimately guide you through a solution from end to end. Okay? That's the difference. Some companies do it. That's why those numbers go up. Okay, but not everyone does. And so I'm going to show you one possible solution to that problem. But in order to do that, we need to kind of talk about the security implications of this. The question is, if any of you are on development teams, you live in the world of develop because you should, not because you can. How many of you have ever bought a tool that's got like 87 features, you use 4? Okay, because nobody asked you. That other garbage that you put in there, yeah, I get it, you can do it, but why? Why would you do it? So, as we look at this, we have to think to ourselves, all right, is it, from a security perspective, wise to expand the use of these types of solutions? Because there's certain inherent implications that people expect, those 16 to 64s, when you add a bot to your user experience. Number one, do people really are they all that questioning of what data they pump into a bot? Your assumption is that the bot is benevolent. It is a machine. The machine does not wish you ill will. So therefore, tell me your mother's maiden name. Would you hesitate? Okay. So, it comes back, then the assumption then is also, the bot is dumb. That's the general assumption. That it's not thinking. It's just simply ingesting data, comparing it to whatever data source it has, and if it has some sort of match, giving you the match. Okay? The assumption is the bot's dumb. That when you're done, everything you pumped into it, including WTF at the end of my statement, is now gone. Now then there's the assumption that, it's unfamiliar with unstructured inputs. I just gave you the example. Okay, if you're really a pissed off system admin, and you go to my bot, and you type what I described, and actually get an answer, I mean, it probably knocked him out of his chair. Because he didn't really expect an answer, he's just really mad, and this is one of the ways he's expressing that anger. Just like me hitting the 0 button every time I get on one of those automated calls. The assumption is the bot doesn't know what you're doing. Well, with AIML and other additions to it, it certainly can. And then there's always, you think of social engineering as being one of the tenets of information security. And we always think of it from the perspective of going up to the administrative assistant, going, "Hi, I'm here from IT. I'm here. He just called me. He's really mad, but he's gone. Do you know his password?" And the assistant's like, "Oh, I'm not sure." Okay, but if I gotta go down, it's gonna take me another 10 minutes to come back, and I'm sure he's gonna be really upset at that point. Well, okay. Our assumption is that, you need a person to do that. Well, what if the bot asks you all the right questions? I need help with password recovery. Okay, what's your username? Here it is. Okay. In order to verify who you are, I'm going to ask you a series of security questions. Okay, sounds reasonable, right? I mean, that's what the guy on the phone would do. Only the guy on the phone's memory isn't all that great, because he's old like me. In 10 minutes, he doesn't even know what he's doing here. Okay? The bot knows, and the bot can retain it for years and years and years and years. So there are serious and specific security implications when we talk about adding additional virtual assistants, particularly complex virtual assistants, to your environment. So at the end of the day, when I show you how to build one in 10 minutes, and you think to yourself, or maybe you think I don't care, or maybe you think this is cool, you now have done two things. You've created an input mechanism and a long-term storage mechanism for structured and unstructured user data based on how you taught your bot to lead the discussion. And you have also now become the proud owner and fully responsible for having that data in your possession. It's kind of like in the state of Wisconsin. If they find a lockpick set in your car, unless you can demonstrate a legitimate reason to have it, you have the potential of drawing charges. So you've now collected passwords and security information for half your staff, and you're retaining it for long ranges of time. You better be able to explain why it's appropriate that you have that. So if we take it a step further, there's certain key concepts that if you're going to go down this path, or if you're going to be the security person on the other end of this path, trying to ensure that people are not creating data sets of critical data without any sort of governance, there's 6 key or 8 key concepts that you have to understand. Okay, and if you know these already, then great, but I'm going to share a little bit about each just so we're all on the same page. At the very root of a modern virtual assistant, and if you talk to people who develop these and you say the word chatbot, they get this "I want to punch you in the face" look. Have you ever seen that thing? And it's mainly because they've evolved so far beyond the rule-driven type of utility that we're accustomed to. Okay, and the reason they've done that is something called natural language understanding. And I want to make sure there's a clear delineation between natural language processing and natural language understanding. Natural language processing is the algorithm and set of algorithms that allow you to take an input, tokenize that input, clean it from whatever irrelevant terminology that is needed, and then use that to analyze the intents and the other requirements that you need. Okay, that's natural language processing. It's in the word, it's processing. You said this sentence, and I tore it apart into its most important pieces, and I compared it to other data sets to try and determine if it's relevant or important. Natural language understanding is taking that a step further by giving you the ability to use that natural language processing in conjunction with multiple other models that are available to you. So I'll give you 2 examples. If you're going to take text-based input or voice-based input, the solution I'll show you later can do both, it doesn't care. If you're going to take this type of input, you're going to get things that the average NLP solution doesn't understand. Okay, my name is John Platais. Okay, I love my last name because no one has it. It's real easy, like in college, you know, they go down the list, Bob Smith, Mike Jones, John, and I just raise my hand and go, yeah, that's me. Okay, but share it with a bot. It's going to remove it as gibberish. I mean, right? It's not a known word, unless you're Latvian, then it's a known word. Okay, it's irrelevant. However, for our purposes, it happens to be very relevant because I'm going to correlate that with the username and ultimately drive it to resolution. But NLP alone won't do that. The merger of NLP with Spacey being another solution that helps you extrapolate names, is going to do that. Dates are another prime example. If you're in the UK, you format your dates in one way. If you're in the US, you format them another way. If you're an absolute Unix nerd, you formulate your dates in that giant Unix string, and then try and think about that great day in 1970 as you try and bring it back to a normal date. Okay? So dates are another one. Duckling is another model you add to natural language processing, specifically designed to parse dates. So, when you think about it, NLP and NLP alone isn't sufficient to do a whole lot. In fact, the last time I gave a speech here, I used NLP to analyze Trump speeches and identify intent and sentiment across various different Trump speeches. You know, I mean, it was great. It came back with a result. The result even got kind of a chuckle. But to what end? It really didn't give me anything that I could use in another effort. So always think about that. Natural language understanding versus natural language processing, very different. Intent and intent processing. This is something that NLU is used specifically for. The ability to take whatever you put in and determine what the likelihood of what you just said is to a certain intent. Okay, and the most simple ones are happy or sad. Is this user happy or sad? If the user starts off with, hey, how you doing? It's probably happy. If it starts off with, damn it, it's probably not. Okay, so the intelligent method to use intents to draw your user down a different path. You as a developer have to be able to, number one, understand the relevant intents for your particular use case, and give the model enough training data to be able to understand it when other people use it. I have a guy that works for me. He's a PhD in statistics. He's my data science manager. And every time I say the word artificial intelligence, he gets this kind of nervous tick. Because it's all math. I mean, there's nothing particularly artificial or intelligent about it. It's just your ability to attack any new problem with the right sequence of mathematical steps. So, think about that. Entities and slots. These are particularly relevant to the solution I'll show you in a little bit. And I'm trying not to talk too much, but I used to be a history teacher, so I can talk for hours. Okay? Entities and slots are, in essence, the intelligent mechanism's way of extracting relevant data from what you said, even if you had no intent of giving them that data. When I say, I want you to extract the mother's maiden name, you know, I could just ask you, what's your mother's maiden name? Or, you know, I could ask you in a different way, you know, was your mother married? No. what was her name? You know, I mean, you can think of a dozen ways to get that data out without asking it directly. Custom actions are the power behind all of it, because you know, you can collect all this data, but what do you do with it? Again, the solution I'm going to show you, it's called RASA. RASA is an open source virtual assistant solution. I selected it for this particular discussion because, number one, it is open source, it's readily available, they have extensive documentation, it's actively being developed, and if you go online, they've taken every key process and they've built video tutorials around it. So as far as you having to try and figure out how it works, they've gone out of their way to make it easy, including a UI for conversation-driven design. The idea being is that you may ask it one way, you may ask it another way, you may ask it a way I've never even heard of, you may ask it 7 different ways each time you visit, and using conversation-driven design, it aggregates it all on the back end, and it uses that to learn. So when that conversation is done today, the bot got a tiny bit smarter. And the next 5 times, it gets a little bit smarter after that. So custom actions is a Python backend that allows you to take the data, input your entities and slots as variables, and then feed that into whatever type of action you want. It may be the username and password, go into an authentication script and come back with the user's profile. You know, I mean, take your pick. Stories. Every bot solution that you have has behind it the notion of a story. Because again, to my data scientist nervous twitch, the machine's not that smart. It can only know what it knows. And so you as a human have to start to give it stories to look at so that it can understand what to do with them. Rules are a bit more strict than stories in the fact that a story can change as the conversation changes. You may have started talking about a performance issue, but then, well, if my performance is in the tank and I need more CPU, then it becomes a capacity story. Then it becomes a security story as you try to provide parameters to a system that are in violation of corporate policy. See, all of these different paths can go down depending on the story that you give it. Rules are different. Rules are stagnant, they're static. You cannot deviate from them without changing the entire intent. Policies and models are really where the secret sauce is. The solution I'll show you has a TensorFlow backend that allows it to process real-time and large amounts of data with a relatively small footprint. And what it does is that every time it learns a new input, it relearns and rebuilds its model. All right. So, one last thing before I actually show it to you, and I like to break this into 2 pieces. Because some people like to hear the talk, and some people like to do the hands-on piece and see how it works. So I usually pause after the talk and then answer any questions, and then we can go into the hands-on piece. And I see that we are still in good shape. So, again, RASA is only one, and I have no particular affiliation or interest in RASA more than any other one. However, I did select it here because of its availability to anyone who wants to use it, because it is entirely open source. It has a well-defined but customizable structure based on YAML in the back end and simple YAML syntax. You can create and expand your bot on the fly or over time, however you choose to do it. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Again, strong online community. Every one of my developers has 3 screens. They have 2 screens for development and then 1 screen just to do research. Because how many times throughout the day do you have to Google something? You know, I mean, it's just a reality. The days of having a C developer who knows C in and out and can answer any question, that's just gone. You know, now I have seasoned developers that even before they write a line of code, they go Google it anyway, make sure they're doing it right. Okay, so, huge online community. Their RASA docs and video tutorials are quite extensive, and then everything under it is open source as well. So if your company is like many companies looking for more cost-effective and supportable solutions, open source is one of the areas that they like to move, for two reasons. First of all, everyone assumes open source is free. That's just not true. Okay, there's portions of it that are free. This is free. You can develop it all you want. If you want any sort of enterprise support, of course, that's where they make their money. So that's one part. And then the second part is its maintainability. Okay, if I get hit by a truck tomorrow, I like to say if I win the lottery, they say if I get hit by a truck. If I get hit by a truck tomorrow, there is absolutely no reason development cannot continue with dozens of other users that can be brought in to support it. They do have a UI, if you choose. Again, just because I'm old, I prefer to work in the command line, but there are people that prefer the UI. And everything's based on conversation-driven design. That's in fact a huge point for the company as a whole. Doing it once is an instant failure, because the minute you train your model, in 10 minutes it's old. Okay, it cannot stand the test of time without extensive maintenance. So your utility needs to learn. Okay, it cannot rely on you to tell it what to look for. If it does, well, it kind of didn't really solve your problem, because you need just as many people to maintain it as you would to answer the phone. And then of course it supports key integrations out of the box. So if you want to have your UI built into your company's Slack environment, that's real simple, right out of the box, built in. Or you want to integrate it with Teams, where you can call up the bot, like you can call up any peer. Okay, all of these pieces are in place and capable, relatively simple. And it does support those key models that I was describing before. Okay. So I am going to change venues, and I'm going to go around here, because if I have to try and move standing there, I'll probably get out of this. All right. So I'm going to walk through a few key pieces. So if you really do have an interest in implementing this, then I'm going to share with you how it's done, so that you can walk out of here tomorrow, sit at a table, and build your own. Okay, so RASA, if you go to rasa.org and you want to get started, RASA is very simple. It's all Python based. So you're going to start by creating a virtual environment. You're going to go ahead and pip install RASA, and it's going to install all the updated dependencies for you. Following that, it's a simple rasa init command, and that will create everything that you see right here in front of you in a well-structured, easy to understand format. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the key files that you need to understand in order to be able to create a solution quickly. And the solution I'm going to show you today, I did while I was drinking my coffee this morning, because I thought, hey, probably be good to have one I know works. So I think it took me all of 15 minutes to create a recover my password bot. Okay, now it doesn't mean it's perfect, it doesn't mean it's got any custom actions, but in terms of the discussion, I can walk you through that simple dialogue right here, relatively quickly. So when you initiate your RASA bot, it's going to preload certain critical files that you will manipulate as you begin to build the solution. Okay, so at the root of it is its data, and I'll talk about that in a minute, its domain, and its config. Now there are others, and I'll tell you that a vast majority of people, you can get up and functional without manipulating the others. The center of the bot's world is the domain, and that's what you see here. The domain is everything it knows, and if it's not in the domain, it doesn't know it. The domain includes a whole group of intents that you've created, and I'll show you where those are in just a second. The default intents include, are you happy, are you sad, etc. Usually I just strip those things out. But you'll notice that on the bottom I've got two that are not. Password recovery and recovery info are two intents that you had to create in order to make this password recovery component work. Under that is your data. Now these are your slots. Your slots are stored in memory, and this is that retention that we talked about earlier. Your ability to be able to ask your end user questions that, again, they may not even know why you're asking, but again, the bots aren't bad, so you might as well tell it. You know, what's your favorite restaurant? What city was your dad born in? You know, these are all things that, sure, but, you know, it's not like the bot's going to go tell anyone, right? So you've got all these components that you're going to add, and you're going to store them in slots. Slots is that piece of memory that particular bit of information is going to be stored until you choose to put it elsewhere. The ones that I've selected or I've put in is mother's maiden name, your favorite restaurant, and your username. And there is no limit to the number. And they are persistent throughout the duration of the session with the user. So if the person comes back, you will never have to ask them their username again. Okay? It will maintain it. Below that, if you choose, you can create forms. I created one just to make it simple. And what forms do is they intelligently keep asking you until the slot is full. So for instance, you know, if you magically evade the mother's maiden name, it will not let you proceed until that slot is full. And then there's all your responses. Your responses can come in the form of free-form text. You can have responses as images, links. You can send them out to a video. You can route them to a different location. Your response is really up to you. Okay, but it has the ability to take all of those pieces and output this in the form of an intelligent conversation with the end user, which it's also tracking and learning in the back end. So that's your domain. If you don't leave with any other bit of information, yet you really want to give this a shot, your domain is going to be everything your bot knows. Okay? How does your bot use it is the other question, and that comes in the form of data and actions. Your data is broken out into three pieces: your natural language understanding, as we described, your stories, and your rules. So if you look at the sample data that I gave them, again, to my data science manager's credit and his nervous twitch, okay, no matter how intelligent you think the machine is, it's not. Okay, you have to give it something to model on. So in this case, I've given it some samples to build its model. Okay, so if somebody says, I need my password reset, the bot doesn't know what that means until you give it enough data points to discover through its natural language processing that the combination of these tokens equals, I want my password reset. So I've given it some samples. I think I forgot my password. Can you help me recover my password? Forgot password recovery. And a good collection, a minimum collection of samples is 2. If you want it to do anything, it needs at least 2. That's not going to be very intelligent. An optimal example or set, which we've discovered, is usually around 100. Now sometimes there isn't 100 ways to ask a question. And, you know, then that is what it is. But that's where the learning piece of this comes in, because I may not know the 87th way to ask to reset my password. It could be something along the lines of, my damn password don't work again. Put it in there. It will begin to learn, and then as other people continue to use it, it's identified the tokens and it starts to learn it without you putting in it. And then there's the whole recovery information side. Okay? My bot doesn't know Bill_Smith. That's gibberish. It would discard it. Even though Spacey is plugged into this bot, Spacey doesn't know what Bill_Smith is, because I've added the underscore. Yeah?
Is there like a pre-existing model in the library?
Oh, being loaded? Yeah. Yeah, I'll actually get to that in a second. So we'll look at that in the config piece. But you'll notice that I've designated samples for username, mother's maiden name, and my favorite restaurant is not McDonald's, but I was too lazy to type anything longer. Okay, so I've given it enough to be able to say, all right, if I type in I love McDonald's, it knows what I'm talking about. Now to your question, the default models are in your config. And right now I'm just using the default models themselves. Now, one of the interesting things about RASA themselves is they use a diet architecture, which is how they're able to merge the multiple models and allow you to pick and choose almost like the salad bar. So if you don't do anything, the models loaded are on the top. You've got your white space tokenizer, regex featureizer, you've got your various vectoring features, etc., all of which then become processed through the diet classifier, and they even have, fallback intelligence if it really doesn't understand what you're talking about. Just to finish that out, credentials, if you need to load credentials for it, if you need to attach it to something, you can do it there as well as activate your endpoints. The second most powerful part of it, so you got your natural language understanding. I gave it enough to try and figure out what somebody might tell it. And then I've taken it a step further and I've said, hey, when somebody asks for that, oh, I did it in rules, excuse me. When somebody asks for that, here's what I want you to do with it. Because it'll retain the data and go, thank you. Mother's maiden name is Jones. Okay, thanks. But if you want them to actually do anything with it, you have to give it a storyline. So you can see this one right here, activate password form. So I created a form that's going to make you tell me all the information I want, otherwise I won't talk to you, and then I will retain that information in my slots. So once I've done all this, just give me 1 second. I'm used to an old-fashioned keyboard. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to train my model. And what it's going to do is it's going to take any new features, new input, new etc., and I'm going to force it to learn it. And so it's going to go through and it's going to build out multiple different models and it's going to retain it in the models folder. And this is its training data. So it's taken it, it's learned it, and it's built its model. So now anything you choose to throw at it, it's going to compare it to that existing model. Takes just a second. Most of it is just sticking to what I already taught it. Okay, and you'll notice that it saved my model. And if you go into the models folder, that's the most recent one, which you can see at the very bottom. Now you'll notice there's multiple. And there's multiple because it's referencing prior models just as much as it's referencing current models, to make sure that as it continues to learn, it's using what it's learned and in essence validating it against prior learnings. So let's see if it works. If you were to use RASA X, you could do all this through a UI. But I'm not, so I'm doing it through the command line, and what I've just initiated is what's called the interactive mode. So it's going to walk me through my discussion, but it's also going to tell me if it's collecting the right information. And you'll be able to see the slots fill up as we talk to them. And it's going to be a short discussion. What it does whenever you go in interactive, it does a retrain on the model. So we'll give it another second. It's a differential training, so it's not doing it all, it's just checking for anything that's changed since the last time I was recording. All right, so you can see the input at the very bottom of the screen. It's probably kind of hard to see, I apologize. And I'm going to start with it, hey. And it's going to tell me, well, I think your intent is to greet. Yeah, I think he's right. Okay? So, and then it's going to say, well, whenever somebody greets me, I'm not rude, I'm going to greet them back. And you can see right up here, it said, all right, hey, how are you? And then it's going to listen. And I'm going to say, I think I forgot my password. and it's going to say the intent is password recovery, which is absolutely correct. In fact, you'll notice up here, it's 100% positive that it's password recovery. If I had said something along the lines of my darn password doesn't work, it would have got it just the same, but it would have been like 97, 98% positive. Okay, but because I spit into it exactly the phrase in my training data, it came back with 100% going, yep, that's it. I know. All right, so it's going to kick off the password form, and it's going to say, you can see right here, can you tell me your username? Sure, my username is Bill Jenkins. And you'll notice at the bottom it said, all right, now mind you, to the average user, they're not seeing any of this. This is just the development, but you can see it's correctly said, okay, Bill Jenkins is your username, and I'm going to store that information. So Bill, that's great. So I got one of my slots. To confirm your identity, can you tell me your mother's maiden name? Sure. Her maiden name was Smith. Nope, it did not like Smith. Her maiden name was... let's just cheat and say one I had already put in there. Her maiden name was, because I don't have Spacey running correctly. Her maiden name was Janice Jones. All right, we're gonna cheat. Janice Jones. Okay, you'll notice that in this case, because I didn't give it enough data because I only gave it 2, it's not too smart, but it did pick out Janice Jones, and it's just like, okay, let's keep that. Now you'll notice the slots. So mother's maiden name, Janice Jones, user doesn't know I'm storing that. I can do anything I want with it. Okay, Bill Jenkins is the username. So it has one more question for me, one more question. Interestingly enough, it says that, what's your favorite restaurant? And I'm going to say McDonald's, just for that one. All right, so it's completed all those, and it's going to utter my response, which says, thanks for the info, Bill Jenkins. So let me get this right. Your mother's maiden name is Janice Jones, your favorite restaurant's McDonald's. That information should come in handy. Have a nice day. Okay, so point being, the more you give it to train on, the better it gets, and it allows you to store that information and use that information in any way you can fathom. And again, you'll have to decide if that's an appropriate direction for you and your company from a security perspective or not. All right, these guys are telling me that I'm done. Sorry, I talked more than I should have. Any last minute questions before they kick me out? Appreciate you all sitting through that. I hope you learned something and think about using bots in your organization in the future. Have a great day.